Check Complete, a referee podcast, is an educational resource for referees by referees, designed to connect and develop soccer officials of all ages and skill levels to better serve the game both on and off the field. Episode 12 of the Check Complete podcast. We're back, baby. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever, whenever you're listening to this. We're excited that you have chosen to take time out of your busy life to engage with the Check Complete podcast. I'm Gordie, the host, and I'm alongside Jon today. Jon, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. We love this conversation with you today. So we've got a couple things that we're going to talk about. Jon is a pro referee, works in the MLS, but he also, his day job is a tax professional.
Professional is the right word.
Tax
Get
professional.
Paid to handle your taxes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Accounting, bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff. You do
got
some bookkeeping work and things like that too.
Absolutely.
Right? For clients outside of the tax season and whatnot. But so tax professional, I mean, if you know him really well, you can call him your tax guy.
Tax guy is actually a great line.
It's a great
actually
line.
call myself tax guy all the time. Seems to fit.
Right, but if you're like a business card or some sort of public material, it's going to say tax professional.
You're going to get tax professional.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so yeah, Jon, we're gonna talk about the referee tax side of things.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're going to go through some definitions of some important items you need to know about taxes, and then we'll get into the good stuff, if there is such a thing with taxes.
With taxes.
Yeah.
It's going to get juicy with taxes. So we'll talk about that on the tax side of things. Some really important information for you to know and to be tracking as an independent contractor that's working as a referee. Some of you that have, some of this will be old hat, but there might be some new things that you can pick up on to make sure that you're getting the best experience with your taxes overall. So I won't steal his thunder, mostly because I do not know what I'm talking about. Then we're going to go, we'll take a quick break. We'll have a word from our sponsor, which also happens to be his business. And then we will do an interview with Jon. We have some fan questions. We appreciate everybody who wrote in. Continue to engage with us on social media at check_complete on Twitter and Instagram, and check complete on Facebook. We want to hear from you as we announce guests and things so that you can participate in the episodes. It makes it a lot of fun when fans engage and the audience engages that way. So we have some of those, as well as we're going to hear your story, talk about kind of where you started and where you are now, as well as some of the things on and off the field. So Let's dive right into this. Let's talk about the tax side of things. Again, as independent contractors, as referees, there are some things that you need to know and be tracking and holding on to. So I'll let you start, and I'll just sit here and learn and lob comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different than your normal kind of W-2 job, right? You work on maybe an hourly wage, get a W-2 at the end of the year, and you just file a tax return. It's a little bit different. So first things first, taxes suck. Let's just get that out of the way. We all know that taxes suck. I do have to say, for legal purposes, the information in this segment is not meant for tax advice. You should always seek professional help from a paid tax professional.
Tax professional, or a tax guy if you know him well enough.
Or a tax guy. Yeah. Make sure you pay them.
Yes.
So we need to get a couple of definitions out of the way, just so we understand terminology before we get too caught up in the details of tax. So the first one you've already mentioned, independent contractor. We kind of throw that word out a lot. Outside of all of my compadres at the Professional Referees Organization, all the referees we're talking to today are most likely independent contractors.
Right.
Whether that's through the league you work for or the college assigner you work for, you're an independent contractor, okay? That means you control your own schedule, you have the responsibility of purchasing your own equipment, things like that. No taxes will be withheld out of your paycheck. So that game fee that you see, that you sign up for, you're gonna see that whole game check in your bank account or form of check, or if you're lucky enough, cash at the field. That's why we like it. Okay? So most of the people we're talking to are independent contractors.
Right.
Okay. The next topic we need to talk about, or definition, is 1099 NEC. It's a form from the IRS. Okay?
Okay.
What do you think NEC stands for? Give me your best guess.
Probably negligible electronic communications.
Wrong. Very wrong.
I knew it would be.
1099 non-employee compensation.
That's basically what I said.
Okay. This is a document that you'll get from either the organization or the individual that you're working for. If you make over $600 in a calendar year, that organization or person is required to issue you a 1099 before January 31st of the next calendar year. So all of the work that we're doing here in 2022, you should see that money show up on a 1099 come January of 2023. Now, the supposed to is kind of it's kind of interesting. Some organizations are a little bit late, but if you claim all of your referee income, you shouldn't have an issue. Okay?
Okay.
The next term is W-9. So when you sign up to referee with a new organization or individual, they're going to ask you for a form. It's called a W-9. Very basic. Your name, your address, your social security number. That way they have your information to issue the 1099
Sure.
at the end of the year. Okay. What I did when I was coming up the ladder is I would have an electronic copy of that 1099, and then just as I needed them, print them off. I would even sign one and keep it like in a safe place. So that way, with all the, it's a little different now because especially for the college referees, a lot of things are going through the same platform, either Arbiter Pay or, a lot of schools are using those systems. Back in the day, when we were just working for the schools individually, you had every game you felt like you were giving another W-9 to a
Or you'd
to
like
an
attach it
administrator.
to like a pigeon's leg and
just
nail
send
it.
it.
Yeah.
Just send it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was early days in your referee career.
Super early. And then the last term I'd like to talk about is just a Schedule C. That's the part of your tax return that's going to report all your referee income and expenses.
Okay.
Each Schedule C is for basically a small business. So all the referees we're talking to, you're basically in business for yourself.
Yeah.
So you can actually just kind of accumulate all of your referee information, income and expenses, and put them on one Schedule C. If you're into other side gigs, or we're living in the gig economy, if you're driving for Uber or running food for DoorDash, those would be separate Schedule Cs.
Okay.
Okay?
So that's almost like from like a putting on your resume kind of thing. You could list yourself as like running your own business as a referee, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of aspects that we're going to get into here in a second that are business-like items.
Right.
that
So
you're
even
doing.
broader than just taxes, but like, hey, if you're trying to be marketable to an employer, this is a job that can, if you articulate it correctly, is a very marketable job for a wide range of other jobs you could be seeking.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as you get a little higher level and you're having to market yourself to assigners. You're having to keep track of your own schedule, show up on time. A lot of those games are now 2 hours before kickoff, 1 hour before
Right.
kickoff. Organizing all your equipment,
Yeah.
communicating with your teammates who are on your crew. There's a lot of aspects of this job that can apply to a plethora of other jobs.
Yeah.
100%. That's a great point.
Oh.
So before we get into some of the items that can be deducted, it's very important to talk about why we need to know those things. And I'm going to touch on this in the referee portion that we're going to do after this.
Okay.
Why is very important no matter what we're doing. Okay? After we add up all your referee income and subtract your expenses, you're subject to 2 types of tax. The government loves to tax us, especially
Yes.
all of us in the middle, which is probably every single person we're talking to right now.
Probably.
So, 2 types of taxes. As I said, taxes suck. The first type of tax is regular old income tax.
Okay.
Our awesome editors are going to put a picture of the 2022 income tax bracket up on the screen.
Yes, they will.
And you're going to see you can fall anywhere between a 10% bracket and a 37% bracket for you big wigs who make tons of money.
Okay.
So you could be taxed from 10% all the way to 37%. I won't get into the specifics of the tax bracket. Consult your tax professional. The tax is progressive, so don't think, if you end up in one bracket, your whole income gets taxed in that bracket. It works a little bit different.
Okay.
But
So that's one.
that's the first type of tax.
First type of tax.
So for this conversation, let's assume this fake referee we're talking about is in the 15% tax bracket, okay?
Okay.
15% tax bracket. Okay, so now here's the real kicker, self-employment tax. Self-employment tax is the way we self-employed people pay into government programs like Social Security and Medicare.
Okay.
Some of the kids watching this podcast probably don't even know what those 2 programs are.
Sure.
Unfortunately, some of the kids watching this podcast may never even see any money from those 2 programs if it runs out. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But that tax alone is 15.3%. Okay? So after we take your income, subtract your expenses, whatever is left over is subject to both of those tax.
Okay.
Remember, this fake referee we're talking about is in the 15% tax bracket. So he's going to pay 15% regular income tax and an additional 15.3 self-employment tax.
So we're at 30.3 if my math is correct.
30% tax.
Oh,
That is the why behind the reason you need to track all of your deductions and expenses. Because we want to get that number as low as possible. And I guarantee there are some people who are watching this podcast right now who do really well, either youth games, college games, high school games. That can add up to be quite a bit of money.
yeah, absolutely.
So we want to get that number as low as possible. That's the goal.
Okay.
Okay, and here's how we do it. Here's the good stuff, if there is any good stuff within
Good stuff. Here we go, baby.
taxes. Okay. The IRS says anything ordinary and necessary to do your job is deductible
As a self-employed person.
as a self-employed person.
Okay.
Okay? So ordinary and necessary is going to be very obvious in a couple of categories.
Okay.
Things like your certification fee, your recertification fee. Nowadays, it feels like we're paying every assigner to use an arbiter account in the
Right.
college game. Those are all going to be deductible on your tax return at the end of the year, so make sure you keep good track. Other obvious things are things like uniforms, things you use every single time you referee.
Sure.
Flags, whistles, cards, coin. All those things are super, super obvious. Maybe even some other supplies like you take a water bottle to the field to stay hydrated. If you're anything like me, you're packing snacks in your bag
Amen.
to stay
Right.
fueled up at halftime. And if you're anything like you, maybe you're packing 2 bottles of sunscreen. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Fair enough.
all of that could be deductible on your tax return.
Okay.
Okay, and then there's a small section of deductions that might not be as obvious as those other ones. Everything we're doing these days is really like cell phone based. So if you're accepting assignments, if you're communicating with your teammates via your cell phone, a portion of your cell phone could be deductible. That could be,
Oh, interesting.
That could be interesting. If you're taking time at home to do referee related activities, nowadays we report everything. Everything gets reported. So if you're doing those reports from a specific spot in your house, if you're using that to do a little bit of bookkeeping, maybe tracking your mileage or keeping track of your game log, maybe a portion of your home expenses could be deductible as well.
Wow.
Okay? Talk to your tax professional. The biggest and best deduction, in my opinion, is mileage. 2022 is a weird year for mileage from the IRS's standpoint. We all know gas prices went through the roof this summer. In trying to combat that expense, the IRS actually raised the mileage rate halfway through the year. So
Heyo.
the IRS doesn't do a lot of good things for us, but every now and then they come through clutch. So for the first half of the year, January to June 30th, 2022, 58.5 cents per mile is allowed to be deducted.
What was that before?
Oh, it changes every year.
Oh,
So
okay.
for the first half of the year, it was 58.5. And then as of July 1st, they bumped it, I'm going to say all the way up, but it's 4 cents. 62.5 cents to combat the gas prices.
Uncle Sam looking out for you.
Uncle Sam coming in clutch.
God bless him.
Okay, so I say that to say it's going to be very important to track your mileage in 2 separate ways this year.
Okay.
One for the first half of the year and one for the second, because we're going to have to report it separately to get you the 2 rates. Okay, so when we talk about mileage, we're talking about mileage to and from your games. Even if you're going from your house to the youth fields a few miles away, that mileage adds up and can be a very big deduction. All of you driving to college games, I've got a lot of friends who drive 2 hours to college games. That mileage is all deductible. Okay, if you're renting a car, that's a separate conversation. But make sure you keep really good track. We're actually going to have some resources for you in the description of this video. It's going to be a couple of spreadsheets, just a basic deduction spreadsheet that'll give you some of the categories, and you can list, date, item you purchased, how much, and then we'll also have a mileage tracker for you, and it'll be broken out with the correct mileage rates. So as your season goes on, you can just kind of type in your games, keep track of your mileage, where you started, where you ended, and just give that to your tax professional. Makes it nice and easy.
Oh,
Okay.
look at that. Don't say we never did anything for you.
I do have to say this again, that all that information you just got was general advice. Please, please, please consult your tax professional on the specifics of any of the things we talked about. Any questions, they can leave them in the comments.
Yeah.
We can get back to them, no problem. But again, seek professional advice. We have a saying in our office that there's no such thing as a stupid question, especially when it comes to taxes.
Yeah.
We would rather make fun of you behind your back for a silly question than assume something and miss a deduction or you pay too much tax.
Yeah.
So that's referee taxes kind of in a nutshell.
Very good. Well, if you do have questions, you are welcome to reach out to us over social media or over email, info@checkcompletepodcast.com. We'll also link some of the information for John's business, his website, and some ways you can reach out. You can reach out to him as well, and he'll be happy to help you. Or obviously, there's probably tax professionals in your area, and there might be some in your referee community near you. Okay, so John does a lot of referee taxes for us in our part of in our neck of the woods, I should say. So there might be some people around you that could be very helpful in that process. So hopefully you can find someone. Again, John, and we'll be happy to connect you. John can be a resource for you as well. So very good. Well, thank you, John.
No problem.
Appreciate it. The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. Visit jfcokc.com. I'm excited to sit down with pro referee Jon Freemon. John, we're really excited to have this part of our episode. The first segment we already talked about was about taxes, specifically for referees to be mindful of some certain things. So thanks for walking us through that.
Yeah, no problem. Just change my shirt real quick and on to the next segment.
That's right. That's right. I did not have a church shirt to change, so I kept this instead of going topless.
Probably the right choice.
That is the correct decision. So we're excited to sit down and talk with John about his life, his journey, his career, and answer some fan questions that came from you all. So John, who are you? Give us just the basic introduction, and then we'll kind of get into your story.
Yeah, sure. We'll go a little personal first, and then I'll get into some of the referee details. I'm a dad of 3. We have 3 kids between the ages of 11 and 15. My beautiful wife, Katie, we've been married now for 15 years this year, which seems like a long, long time. But yeah, we live here in Olathe. Always have, probably always will, because we have a pretty good area here, and we like it here. From a refereeing standpoint, I first got certified in 2003. I started with, when I say super recreational, it couldn't be more recreational. Every game was red versus blue recreational. That's how recreational I started refereeing. Obviously, over time, the games got a little bit better, a little bit older, a little bit harder. And now I'm a contracted professional referee with the Professional Referees Organization. This is my 2nd year with a contract.
Wonderful. And your day job?
My day job, my wife and I own a tax preparation firm. We do taxes. We did about 1,000 tax returns last tax season. So that's a pretty growing part of our life that we're excited about.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. So that's kind of a little bit of your background, but let's start back. We can talk referee specific, and if there's personal aspects of this that creep in, I think that's the case, right? It's never just the referee journey for all of us.
Sure.
There's always, life takes a different course, and that impacts us in our professional world, whether that be refereeing or a full-time job or the combination of both. So start from the beginning. You said 2003. That's when you got started. How old were you then?
2003? Do you want to say how old I was in 2003?
No, because everybody's going to be doing mental math at that point.
People will be
so you were
very
young.
upset. Young. I was a multi-sport athlete growing up, so at the time, our baseball team, all the kids on our baseball team got certified that same year. Our parents just wanted us a way to earn a little bit of money, and there was no better money for a kid who was 13 years old than refereeing soccer at the time. So our whole baseball team went out, got certified that first year. Some of us lasted longer than others, obviously, but that's how I got started.
Is anyone on your baseball team also in the MLS right now refereeing?
Let me check the roster. No, no, they are not.
All right. Okay, so that's where you got started, and so it was the rec stuff here locally on what? Well, this is only going to mean to a few people, but was it Heritage Park?
No, it was actually Olathe Soccer Club at Prairie Center.
Oh yeah, sure enough.
I don't even know if they play soccer games at Prairie Center anymore.
I don't know if they do either.
But it was super recreational. I'm talking metal P whistle, like I said earlier, blue versus red. I remember the next season, they allowed the teams to pick their own colors.
Oh boy.
And it was chaos. They didn't tell the referees. So we only had yellow shirts. And all of a sudden there were yellow teams. And we just had to wear yellow shirts until the next season. And then we got more colors after that. But yeah, I remember when they made that change, we almost had to strike. It was a pretty big deal. It was a pretty big deal.
Referee strike.
Recreational soccer.
Yeah.
It's legit.
It is. So so that's where you got your humble beginnings, we'll call it as such.
That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, humble beginnings. Okay. So then your career, kind of the upward trajectory, right? And you're still, you by no means, you're still in that upward trajectory, right? Sure. Even though you've reached the pinnacle of domestic soccer in the United States, there's still upward trajectory. So walk us through that trajectory, that path.
I think the natural progression for those of us here in Kansas City, after your recreational soccer, we have one of the biggest youth leagues in the country here in Kansas City with Heartland Soccer. So that was the natural progression for me. I think I spent 2 years doing recreational soccer, and then it was just time to make more money. So I thought, let's go work for Heartland and make some more money.
Sure.
I can remember very specifically my first couple games at Heartland, with Heartland, a couple at Black Bob Park, and then mainly at Heritage Soccer Park. It's funny, full circle, and I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but my son just played in a state cup tournament at Heritage last year, and it was weird being back there on the other side of it. But I can remember my first couple games at Heritage. I had no idea what I was doing, and I learned very quickly that I had no idea what I was doing. I remember a ball going over the goal line for a corner kick on the opposite side. I was the AR. The opposite side, and I pointed for corner kick like this, communicating that it is a corner kick on the far side of the field.
Sure.
And I remember the referee running over saying, goal kick or corner kick? And I was such a scared little boy that I just kept pointing to the far side of the field.
Yeah.
It was chaos. I'm actually very embarrassed to tell that story if that came out of my mouth. But when you say humble beginnings, we all start not knowing anything about officiating, right? And then as you kind of just climb the ladder, get more games, get more experience, things happen.
Right.
So humble beginnings at Heritage Soccer Park, and then you just keep climbing the ladder. Like, my work rate was really good when I was young, so that got me more opportunities eventually at State Cup. Shout out David Friedberg. I hope he sees this. He was the first referee I saw give his heart and soul to a soccer game. He ran in a State Cup game so hard he almost passed out.
Wow.
And that was my first time where I was like, wow, like someone really cares about the game, and I should too. And that was my first State Cup. I can't remember what field it was at right now, but that was my first time thinking, like, this is serious. Like, let's give it our all and kind of see what comes of it. After that, you just get opportunities at the state level. You kind of get plucked from the state level, and then regionally you get opportunity, and then you get plucked from the regional level, and then they just start sending you everywhere.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to have support at the state level. RSRA Bill Davey and some of the other state directors, where they just sent us places to get opportunities. There's a trio of us, myself, Kyle Atkins, which I think was on one of your episodes earlier, and then Ryan Cook. And we just traveled as a crew and did as many games as possible at every level, youth games, amateur games. And we had a good time doing it.
Yeah.
But there were some really tough games, games.
Yeah. I bet. Well, there's a couple things I want to pull from that. One of them is just, you're talking about work rate. Like, that's what helped you stand out in people's minds, is what you said, right?
100%. I got some advice once from a really, really seasoned referee, and he said, control the controllables. So a couple of those things can be your knowledge of the laws, your work rate, your fitness to a certain standpoint. If you can control your controllables, you get more grace when things happen out of your control. So that was the one that was easiest for me, because I was a multi-sport athlete at the time. So work rate and fitness rate were very easy for me to control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge, and that's something that I think when we work with young officials all the time, and I think those of you that are in any sort of administrative or leadership roles, that's helping them understand. I understand you might be here for a paycheck. We had an entry-level clinic this morning where a young lady, I said, why are you guys here? And she goes, I owe my sister a pair of shoes. I said, so you have to get money to buy her a pair of shoes? She goes, yes.
Not a bad reason to start.
Fair enough. And then the natural question I asked the rest of the class is, how many of you are indebted to other people and you're here? And no one else was. If they're out there just to gain money, that kind of thing, there's different reasons why. We'll talk about that a little bit. But if you go out and just, like you said, give it, effort. It is amazing the opportunities that are unlocked when referees put their heart and soul into some things.
Absolutely. A lot of the people listening to this right now have competed at something in some facet of their life. And if you can remember, and this was also another reason why I decided to give refereeing a real chance, in multiple of my sports, the refereeing wasn't very good. And if you can remember a referee kind of giving you the short end of the stick, you know how that feels. And you don't want that to be how anyone else feels.
Yeah.
So give it your all, work really hard, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you're moving up the ladder. Your work rate is making you stand out as well. As just as you continue to work games, you learn more, you gain experience, decision accuracy, all that kind of stuff is catching people's eyes. Okay, so then you get opportunities to work at, like you said, the regional level. Regional level being the regional tournaments, not in the regional concept that we think about it now with shifting from state referee to regional referee, okay? But then you do upgrade to a state referee at the time, right? So that was a tangible upgrade moment. What was that procedure like for you?
Terrifying.
Okay.
Back in my day, going from 8 to 7, just with the one assessment, it's a big deal at the time. But then as you keep going from 7 to 6, at the time you needed 3 assessments. I believe it was 2 in the middle, 1 on the line. One had to be an amateur game. And the difference between amateur soccer and youth soccer is unbelievable. Just the speed of play, the player's mentality, the gamesmanship, how they treat the referee, everything is so different. I wouldn't say we have the best amateur soccer in our area compared to some of the other larger states, like even in Chicago, or if you go down to Texas, Dallas, or LA, or anywhere in Florida. So that was some of the reasons we had to travel to get our experience. But upgrading from 7 to 6 was a good time. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I failed quite a few assessments on my way up the ladder. When I went from 6 to 5, I failed 1. And then when I was trying to go from state 5 to national referee, I actually failed my first 2 national referee assessments.
Wow.
And almost quit because it was so traumatizing.
Wow.
Not a lot of people know that, but now everyone knows it.
Yes.
But luckily I had some good people, and we'll talk about our whys here in a second, but if you don't have good people with you along the way, you're going to lose faith in the system eventually, or you're going to lose progress. When I failed that first national assessment, I got Kyle on the phone, went back to my hotel room, called him, and just laid it all out there. He said, "You better not quit. If you quit, we can't be friends anymore." And that friendship was worth it enough to keep going. I wish I could tell you how many times Kyle and I had that conversation about me quitting.
Wow.
I mentioned earlier that I was lucky enough to get a contract from the Professional Referees Organization last year. I could tell you 2 years before that, I literally had an email typed out ready to just quit refereeing.
Wow.
It's a tough journey to the top at Pro. I'm sure we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
But upgrading, it's fun, it's challenging, but it's difficult. So to anyone who's looking to upgrade, it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
It really does. It really does.
So that journey to the top, that part of pro and that kind of thing, I think there's a lot of young referees that watch this, and that's the goal. So there's still a lot of mystery and gray areas shrouded in that,
Sure.
So what was that like at least from your experience? I know we probably don't have time to really go into in-depth of all of that, but what was that experience like
Sure.
for you?
And the experience that I had that I'm going to go over is a little bit different now, just the professional landscape all the way from like what we used to call Development Academy, which is now MLS Next and MLS Next Pro.
Right.
It's just always shifting, so it's a little bit different. So when I was coming through the ranks, Development Academy started, and those were the top level games that you could do. Top level games. Obviously, we have Sporting Kansas City, the Major League Soccer team here locally. So from the very get-go, we had an academy team. So those games were available to us. So my journey included getting to do those games. And then, like I said earlier, the state of Kansas, we were blessed enough for them to support us to go to other events, mainly academy events at the time.
Sure.
Every event you go to is opportunity. There are eyeballs always watching.
Sure.
So that was the goal. Just get in front of as many eyeballs, work as hard as you possibly can, and hopefully you get selected from there. So out of a development academy showcase, I was then selected to participate in a U20 tournament, a U20 national team tournament, just a year after Development Academy has started.
Wow.
Again, every time you go up a level, you start all the way over. It's mind-boggling. When I talked about going from rec to Heartland and the games were competitive, I didn't know how to signal. When I went from Heartland to Development Academy, I didn't know what a tactical foul was. Do you know what I mean? When I went from Academy to that U20 national team tournament, I think it was USA, Costa Rica, 2 other international teams. The speed of play was just way over my head. And I'll be honest, I didn't have a good showing. But you take things as they come to you, as the challenges come, and you just learn and just try and get better. So that's kind of how my pathway started, through Development Academy, and then on to bigger and better events from there.
Sure.
I would say to all the officials nowadays, your goal should be to start doing MLS Next and MLS Next Pro. I think that's the new kind of academy pathway into professional refereeing. Generally speaking, my advice would be do as many games as you can and get as much experience as you can, because that's where you're going to learn the tools for the next level. So as soon as you feel comfortable doing the games you're doing, you should try to find harder and higher level games. That's the best advice I could give. And then obviously you got to get in front of people who can make big decisions for your career.
Right.
That's the goal.
Right. So what was that experience like getting, because you were doing VAR. How long before you were actually given a contract with Pro?
Yeah, so I got a call from Alex Pruce, who at the time was the director of what we call the development group. And this was like a group of officials who were kind of like the next in line to be considered for MLS. So I got invited into the development group as a referee. That first year, it was a tiered system. So A, B, and C. They invited all of us into Tier B, gave us half a season to perform, and then they shifted people up and down, and then filled out 3 tiers, A, B, and C. So there was a year of that. I think the first MLS game for VAR was August of 2017. So I was already had 6 months in the development group, had kind of, created some good relationships with some people. I got a call from Alex Pruce who said, hey, we think this would be a good opportunity for you to be in the VAR program. What is VAR? I don't know what you're talking about. It was brand new to us. The United States was actually lucky because FIFA kind of handpicked our league to kind of launch VAR. Like we were like the guinea pig of VAR. So Howard Webb was hired to be the VAR manager. I got the phone call from Alex Pruce saying, he thinks my personality and my skill set fit that pretty good. So why don't you give it a try? I said, great, yeah, let's do it. So we went through a whole training process with VAR. We went to camps and got kids to play on fields and set up cameras and pretend they fouled people in the penalty area, and we got to trade on the system. And then I was lucky enough to actually work one of the opening games for VAR, the second half of 2017.
Wow.
It turned out to be a really good fit for me and my personality and kind of my skill set mentally and how I see games. So I was actually pretty good at VAR. The project was incredible. I mean, we were the guinea pigs, so all the mistakes flowed through us, all of the goods, all of the bads, and everything in between flowed through our officials here in the United States.
Yeah.
So I actually owe that program a lot of credit because I think without that program, I don't get the opportunities that I got to show that I could referee at a high level, and then get offered a contract, 3 years later.
Wow. So. And you're not going to mention this, but you were dubbed the most effective VAR in, was that 2019?
I think that was 2019. I'm really not sure how that stat was.
I heard Greg Barkey say that one time.
Greg Barkey, he created that stat. He pulled embarrassing pictures off our Facebooks and put them up at Pro Camp, and dubbed us all these weird terms. Shout out Greg Barkey.
We'll get him on here.
Love him to death. I think that had to do with your check time. Like I was like one of the lower check times, average check times. So, you know, when I'm looking at something, it took me less time to get the right answer than other people. I think that's how that was created.
So what was the skill set that you feel like what makes you a good VAR?
That's a really good question.
I thought it was when I was thinking of it. I was like, I'm going to ask this, and it's going to be freaking good.
That's a really good question. And I think it's a question that Pro is still currently working on.
Sure.
5 years into we're no longer in a project, like this is full-fledged VAR now. I think it's actually a really good question. This is just my opinion.
Yeah.
It might differ from someone else's, but
Consult your local VAR professional.
please, please. I think at the top of that list is communication.
Okay.
100%. So when we sit in the VAR booth, I wish I had a picture of it. Maybe I can find one and we can pop it up on the screen. But we have double headphones like this.
Mm-hmm.
The referees on the field are all open mic except for the fourth official. So all of the noise from the field is being fed into your headphones at all times. You can't turn it off. So if players are screaming, if the crowd is screaming, if the referee is screaming, that noise is all going into your headset. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're trying to look at a video screen, communicate with your assistant VAR on this side, asking them to, you know, watch off the ball, or sometimes they're narrating things that are happening. And then on this side, you're communicating with the operator who's running the system, the program, and, you know, rewinding, backing up frame by frame, 100%, 50%, show it to me again, all while that noise is in your head.
Wow.
So I would say communication is at the peak of good VARs. I'm gonna end the list there.
Okay.
I think if you have really good communication, all of our VARs are really good in our league. All of them have a ton of experience. But if your communication is good and you can start there, all the other things kind of fall into place.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have to be a good decision maker too. You can only look at a replay so many times before you have to say recommend a review or check complete. So maybe I'll add 1A and 1B, communication and decision making.
Sure. If someone was like a DJ, do you think would that be helpful? Like they're in front of a screen and you're just like, you know.
DJs would struggle. DJs would struggle because I feel like DJs want to communicate everything to the crowd, and VARs are a little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit more reserved.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. And then you guys now have VAR. You guys now have VAR in a centralized location.
Believe it or not, yeah. So when the program started, there are 2 extra people on the referee crew going to the stadium, the VAR and the AVAR. MLS decided, hey, we kind of want to be like the other major sports leagues in our country, and we now are centralized in Atlanta. The word on the street is that it might be a temporary location. The idea down the line is to build out an actual facility for VAR, whether that's in Atlanta or New York or Dallas or Denver, to be determined. Kansas City, maybe. I'd shout out for that. But to that point, I was just in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and I was doing Seattle Sounders versus FC Dallas. That game was on the West Coast and kicked off at 7:30 Pacific. For those of us who are good at math and can jump 3 time zones, it kicked off 10:30. Which is way past my bedtime. I can't tell you how many cups of coffee and snacks I had to eat to stay up for that game.
Yes.
But that could be a problem in the future, so they're looking maybe to move it westward, so it's a little bit more centralized.
So maybe Kansas City could have a shout for that.
I don't see why not.
Who knows?
We got good fiber here.
I think that, up until they moved to Atlanta, I didn't think I'd be a good VAR. But now that it's in Atlanta, one of my favorite things to do at sporting events is to stop by the concession stands. And I feel like I would have, I'd pick a lull in action, and then I'd get back and I'd have a hard time operating things because my fingers are covered in grease from nachos or something. That would be my biggest fear as a VAR.
Going to the stadium.
Correct, being in stadium.
Gotcha.
But now that we're in Atlanta, I'm like,
there's no concessions.
There's no concession stand.
Maybe a coffee station.
Yeah, which is fine. What's the worst I can do? Spill it all over that would be bad.
That'd be pretty bad.
Do you have This question just came from one of our technicians behind a camera. Do you have a favorite VAR to work with when you're a referee? Are you even allowed to say that? Is this going to start a riff amongst your peers?
Here's what I'll say. we as referees are allowed to have a list of people we prefer to work with.
Okay.
And then some people will create a list of people they do not prefer to work with. I do not have anyone on either list.
Oh, really?
Correct. Now, if you say my favorite VAR to work with, I can say that. I'm going to say a name. I'm going to say a full name.
Okay.
I'm very big on positive reinforcement. Like when I make a good decision, I like to hear that I made a good decision. It just pumps me up. I'm not going to lie. Some people call that petty. Just feels good.
No, that's great. This is great. I love what you're saying. Keep going. This is wonderful.
As of recent, my favorite VAR to work with, Jorge Gonzalez. Shout out Jorge Gonzalez.
Well, there you go.
The Jefe himself.
Jorge, God bless your ministry. That's wonderful.
No, Jorge does a really good job of communicating, like we just spoke to a second ago. You know he has your back in a positive way. He's going to correct you if you're wrong, and he's going to support you if you're correct. And that when you can trust on the field, especially at the MLS level, it takes all the extra worry out of it. So right now, Jorge Gonzalez.
There you go. Jorge, there you go.
Love you, Jorge.
See if we can get him on the podcast too. Why not?
Why not?
It's such a very positive episode for us.
It'd be great.
That'd be awesome. Very good. Okay, that's really, really cool. Now that you're into pro, gosh, I have so many questions. And we have fan questions, I know. But now that you're into pro, now that you're full-time, I mean, you're contract referee, what's been the highlights for you over these 2 years?
I have to start with my first MLS game.
Yeah.
Both fortunately and unfortunately, it was in September 2020. So we were, thigh deep in the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there were no fans for my first game in Chicago, but Katie was able to bring the kids. They weren't able to go to the game, which was kind of a bummer. But we just made that whole weekend about, Chicago, the game. Quick story time about that game in Chicago. When you do your first game, it kind of gets publicized as your first game.
Yeah.
Pro puts out a little statement. All the people that you're connected with know it's your first game. The amount of support that I received on my phone on game day was overwhelming, to say the least. Like I literally had to pull the car over. At the time, because of the pandemic, all the referees were required to rent their own vehicle because we were just trying to limit, time together. I literally had to pull my car off the road on the way to the stadium, and I just cried for like 5 minutes.
Oh.
And just like, okay, so I got to referee a game.
Right.
Just the support from social media, text messages, voicemails, it was just overwhelming. So I would say that was like the highlight of the last 2 years.
That's amazing.
The full circle highlight of the last 2 years.
And
that's the game
players,
ball. That's the game ball from that game.
That's game ball.
That's
yeah,
the game ball
there
from
it
that
is.
game.
And the players and coaches probably knew it too, right?
They do, but there's so many highlights in that first game. So as you're climbing the ladder of refereeing, you're doing games, you're doing college games, you're doing academy games. You're refereeing players who are going to make it into MLS. Not all of them make it, obviously, but some of them do. So I had a moment with a player, I won't say his name, but I had refereed him in academy. I had refereed him at the USL Championship level. And now it's like we had both kind of made it into MLS. So right before kickoff, we had a moment. It was like, hey, bro, good to see you. Good to see you, too. Congrats. And we both kind of exchanged that congratulatory kind of fist bump.
Yeah.
So that was another highlight
Yeah.
of that game. So just be careful as you're climbing the ladder because you never know who you're going to see at the next level.
Right.
That's some advice I would give.
Right.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's neat. I'm sure there's probably a lot more, and just time permitting, we probably can't go through all the details, but I'm sure there's probably more on the other side too. There's moments where you're just like, this is not fun, and that's probably the case, right? Well, that's with any job.
Any job has that. At the end of the day, it is a job, and there's a lot of work that comes with it. We do a ton of training. We do a ton of compliance. Like we're reporting back to pro on a daily regiment. So there's a ton of work involved, but my why, which I guess we can get into now.
Yeah, let's go for that.
Is very, very strong on, why I'm refereeing and what I'm refereeing for. Katie and I do this thing where once I have enough miles accrued, we fly one kid out to a game. So Katie comes, a kid comes, and we just make that weekend about them. and they love it. They love it. So, my son Jordan, he's been to Seattle. My daughter Kylie, she's been to Salt Lake City and DC. And my daughter Kaden, she's been to New York City. And they get to see places in the country that maybe they would have seen in other facets, but they've seen in a different way because of soccer. So that makes all of the workouts that are really hard, that makes all that stuff, all the assessments, all the media coverage, sometimes negative, it makes it all worth it if your why is strong enough. So,
probably helps to not look at Twitter.
Twitter is a dangerous, dangerous place. If you don't take anything out of this episode, take this. Stay off of Twitter. Especially after you referee. Just don't do it. Just delete the app. Log out of the browser. Just close your account. It's not worth it.
I remember Katie texting me about a game you had last year, I believe, and she was like, I saw on Twitter, and I go, that's your first mistake.
I tell her all the time. Do not go to twitter.com after I referee. Go any other time. Do not go after I referee.
Yeah.
She gets super protective.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm actually kind of scared of what she would do if someone said the wrong thing.
Mama Bear.
Mama Bear's coming out strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's get into some questions.
Okay.
Or did you have anything else you wanted to add to your story?
We've covered a lot of it.
Okay,
Let's cover the questions.
Really good stuff. And the why, I think, is huge. You and I have talked about that just in our personal relationship about understanding the why. And honestly, that comes from the coaching side has really done a huge emphasis on the coaching side of things of helping players understand their why. And when we're all in this, and really it's not just soccer, right?
Right.
What motivates us to perform in whatever we're doing? And I think this is no different. So taking a moment, man, pause the episode if you need to. Get out something and journal out and let that shape you and adjust that, because that can change, right?
Here's the thing. We'll just talk about refereeing specifically, but it applies to just life in general. When it's fun and easy, you don't really need a why.
Yeah.
When it's fun and easy, you just go. I mean, I had a game a couple weeks ago, Houston versus Dallas. It's the Texas Derby. They introduced Hector Herrera, big-time Mexican national player. The stadium was sold out. I couldn't have had more fun doing that game. I didn't really need a why. But then there's other times, like I mentioned, some of our regimented items, training. We have weekly webinars where we all get together. I'm about to go to referee camp in Dallas here in a couple weeks, and we're going to be there for a week. That's part of the job that is kind of strenuous and can kind of wear you down a little bit.
Sure.
So those are the moments where you need that why to get through some of the hard times. I've had some games. I had a game earlier this season. I made a lot of bad decisions. It's my first game in 6 months. Didn't go very well. But if your why is not really strong enough, that can kind of alter your route for the rest of the season.
Sure.
The why kind of brings you back to center, right? Yeah. And I've had some pretty smooth games since then. But your why is so important. I can't iterate that enough. Why?
That's great. All right, well, why don't we get into some fan questions?
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Be sure to tip us on something. I don't know. We'll figure out a way for you to pay me for that line. Let's get into some questions. This one comes from Anthony here in Overland Park. How do you balance work and career and refereeing and family and all that you have going on?
Good question. Part of being in pro that I've enjoyed the most is what they've brought to us. So I mentioned we go to referee camp every now and then. They used to do a really good job of bringing in people outside of soccer to talk with us, psychologists, life coaches, and it's been really great. And I learned from one of those psychologists, the best thing you can do is be present where your feet are. So if you're at a soccer event, you are present in that event. If you're at home with your family or you're at home with your roommates, you are present in that moment. And that's really kept everything kind of organized for me. When I'm home, I mean, I cleaned the kids' bathtub today when I came home. I just came home from Colorado, did a game last night. I came home and I cleaned the kids' bathtub because it needed to be cleaned.
Right.
So we're just present where your feet are. When I go on the road and referee, I check in at home, obviously. But I'm present in that game 100%. So if you're present where your feet are, it'll help you kind of stay organized.
Yeah. That's wonderful. You may have already touched on some of this, but what have been some of the biggest lessons? This is also from Anthony. What are the biggest lessons you've learned as you moved up? on that.
That is a
progression?
loaded question.
I'm sure it is.
That is a loaded question, but I'll give a couple of items. Very, very specifically, never forget where you come from and who helped you get there. Refereeing can be a very lonely job. Like we say this to each other before every kickoff, every game. Like it's just the four of us today. Like the players don't care about us. All the people watching the game don't care about us. So refereeing can be very lonely. And if you don't have that support system, especially the people you know and love from an early age, early career, it's going to be really difficult when you get to the next level. And that's at any level along the way.
Yeah.
From my rec days to youth to development academy to college to pro. You got to remember who came with you.
Yeah. That's great. This one comes from Drew, here also in Kansas City. How were you originally identified for pro? So that identification process. I know there's a lot of referees as they move up the ladder, they're going, how do I get into this pro thing? So what was that for you?
That's also a loaded question.
I'm sure.
Really good questions today. I would say the U.S. Soccer National Referee Program is what I was identified out of. So you climb the ladder. Back in the day, it's not the same anymore, but 8 to 7, you upgrade then to state referee, then you upgrade to national referee. And then the people who make the decisions now have a list of names or a pool of referees and assistant referees where they're like, these are the people who are next. So getting into that program, I think, is the first step. And then, like I mentioned earlier, just getting yourself in front of as many people who can make decisions as possible, and then performing well in front of those people, that will get you continued opportunity.
Yeah.
So I was blessed to be in that national referee program as the development group started with pro. So, you know, they really selected almost every national referee to begin with to put into the pro development group. There were some non-nationals in the group as well, but a lot of us came from the national referee program.
Yeah.
And then once you're in that group, now it's just time to perform, work hard, make good decisions, be a good person, kind of. So
Yeah.
I would say the national referee program I owe a lot to.
Two questions from Logan. So the way he worded this, what would you tell your younger referee self? We've worded it with other guests. If you could go back and talk to first year little Jon Freemon, what would you tell him? Now that you know what you know.
I would first teach him how to make a corner kick signal, regardless of what side the goal the ball goes off on.
Yeah.
I'm joking a little bit. First year Jon Freemon, what would I tell him? Enjoy the games that you're doing. I think as people, we just tend to kind of look forward. That used to be me in the college game specifically. So here in our area, we have just so many levels of college just in our backyard, right? We have everything from junior college to NAIA to NCAA, all three divisions, right? And I was getting some Division I games at one point, and I would kind of look forward to those ones while I'm working a different one. And I feel like I missed opportunity to enjoy some of the games that I was doing because I was looking forward. So I would say, that's what I would say to that one.
Yeah. And then another question he asks is, you talk about loaded questions.
Oh, no.
What one person helped you the most in making you a successful referee? That seems like an unfair question.
It's actually not an unfair question.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm going to tell you why. And no one that watches this is going to get offended by my answer. My answer is my wife, Katie.
Yeah.
100%. Along the way, you go through so many hard times getting into the professional ranks that you have to have someone that you can lean on. Whether that be a really good friend, a spouse, a significant other, you have to have someone solid as a rock to lean on and is there no matter what. And that was Katie for me.
Yeah.
So I told a couple stories about Kyle and how I called him a couple times and he said, don't quit or else. Katie was the one outside of the phone call, carrying everything else emotionally.
Yeah.
If I'm being super honest, Katie's cried because of soccer more times than I have. Like when I get a tough assessment or, I don't get promotion, quick like sub story. They brought all of us into the professional referee organization development group at B, gave us half a year to perform. I was promoted to A. And then after the second half of the year, I was demoted to B for whatever reason. And that was really hard because I was on this upward trajectory, and then to be just chopped off at what felt like the knees to go back down was really tough.
Yeah.
But I just worked my way back up into A, and then obviously got the contract a couple years later. But Katie was behind the scenes carrying that emotional weight of those decisions that were out of our control.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's actually a very controversial question.
Okay.
If Kyle's upset, he can call me later.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Okay.
All right. Another question. This is from Kyle, not that Kyle.
Okay.
Kyle from the Boston area, who's been a very faithful listener
Hey, Kyle.
from Boston.
I'm not even going to try.
Where did you pack your car? But never mind. So could you talk a little bit about communication with players for game management? Because I think that's a lot of us. I know I'm one of those people that I'm like, I want to hear the audio of what that exchange was like, right? You want to know, how do you manage people that are really angry or anything? So I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, Kyle, but talk about that communication for management.
So I'll first start by saying Pro has recently introduced a platform to us where we can now listen to our entire game audio, start to finish. This is the first year we've had access to that, right? You can always remember things that you've said, but it's different when you play them back in certain situations and kind of hear your tone, hear yourself panting into the microphone because you just made an 80-yard run, losing your temper a little bit. That's happened. What's the question specifically?
Like, talk about that communication, and maybe the question is, so the question was, could you talk about communication with players for game management? So maybe like successful or moments where it was successful or tips.
Here's what I'll say. You have to have a toolbox of communication. So you have to be able to communicate with a ton of different personalities. So any one game could have the nicest person on the planet to the meanest person on the planet. And without naming any player names specifically, that was my game last night, Colorado Rapids versus Columbus Crew. There was one player who yelled from the very first decision at me and not very nice things. And then there was a player who literally put his arm on my shoulder as we walked off at halftime, just asking questions, just like a normal human being. So you have to have the ability to communicate with both types of people.
Right.
Now, if I'm giving you very specific advice, if you're handling that person who's very upset and angry all the time, I usually don't respond. And then later in the game, when the time is right for me, I then approach them. So let's say controversial decision, this player's yelling, rah, rah, rah. I'm doing my job, putting the spray down, getting the 10 yards, and then maybe the player shoots it over the crossbar for a goal kick. Now I'm coming back to that player. Hey, what's the problem? So they're much less aggravated, they're much less emotional, and I've found success in communicating with those type of players better in those moments than when they want to communicate. So keep control as much as you can. And then the second piece of advice, I would say, try not to lose your temper.
Yeah.
We as referees already start kind of below sea level, if you will. And so we don't get as much grace as the players do. I saw a player in my game last night play a ball directly out of bounds for a throw-in. Directly out of bounds. His teammate was there, and he played it there. And no one booed. No one said, you're terrible. No one said, what are you thinking? I gave a yellow card that was the easiest yellow card I've given, and all 20,000 people booed me. So we already start behind the 8 ball. So if you lose your temper, it's always look at the mad referee, no matter what the player has said to you. So keep them under control, keep them on your time if you can, and then keep your composure.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I've kept my composure every single time, but I can't, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
It's tough.
We don't need examples. We want them, but we don't need them.
I can't give them.
All right. If you could, this is from Rami. If you could start your refereeing career in one state/city, which would you choose? Interesting question.
That's an interesting question. I'm going to alter it just slightly because I think it's easier to answer if we alter it a little bit. how would I start my professional referee career with the Professional Referees Organization? Traveling from our city, Kansas City, KCI, MCI, depending on what you call it, it's difficult sometimes. Not a lot of direct flights. We have a pretty small, pretty bad airport. Shout out to the new airport, scheduled to be done in 2023. So hopefully that brings us some more options.
Hopefully.
But the answer would be I'd like to be in a city with a bigger airport with more flight options.
Yeah.
My wife's favorite sister lives in the Dallas area, so that has always been on our short list, Dallas-Fort Worth. And they have a nice big airport. You can go anywhere, pretty straightforward. Similar cost of living to Kansas City. So I think that would be my answer. Dallas-Fort Worth area is where I would go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. All right. And our last question, this comes from Kyle Atkins.
Who?
Excuse me, the Kyle Atkins.
The World Cup AR Kyle Atkins?
He's like the Ohio State of ARs. The Kyle Atkins. What is your favorite Froggy Fresh song? That was the question that was.
It's an easy answer, but I'm embarrassed of the question.
We did not tell John that this question was coming.
Son of a gun. Everyone pause the YouTube, open a new tab, and just type Froggy Fresh Denzel Washington into your new tab and watch the whole video. It's a rap about how great Denzel Washington is.
Okay.
In his acting career.
Okay.
And he hits all the top movies and just crushes it.
Oh, wow.
Froggy Fresh, and don't forget his best friend Mike.
Okay.
Second favorite Froggy Fresh song.
Oh, there's more.
Is
But
I think it's called Best Friend, but he basically raps a love song to his best friend Mike, and it gets me every time. It's great.
Wow.
It's great. I'll play it for you guys later.
Yeah. Well, not you, but us. But the internet. You can do the internet.
You're going to laugh when you hear it. I just want to prep you. It's not like, it's almost parody. It's
okay.
We think it's parody, but I actually think Froggy Fresh thinks he's an actual rapper. So it's good.
Okay.
But it's bad, but it's good.
Well, we derailed at the right time because that's the end of our interview with you, John. John, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I love listening to these types of conversations. I think we can find ourselves in stories and use it for encouragement. And maybe it's just if you're having one of those moments where you're just feeling like, why should I do this? Maybe you connected with some of John's story or some of the other guests that we've had. But today, especially as we've heard that story, we appreciate it. So thanks, John.
Awesome. Thanks.
The Check Complete podcast is brought to you in part by JF Consulting Tax Preparation and Bookkeeping. Taxes suck, we can help. Visit jfcokc.com. This has been episode 12 of the Check Complete podcast. Gordie Wetmore, joined by Jon Freemon. John, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
We love hearing your story. We love hearing about some practical tips for referees as they prepare for and work with their tax professional.
Please. Tax guy.
Their tax guy or girl, right. Yeah, absolutely. Some resources, again, we'll put those in the bio of the video as well as share those in a couple other ways for those of you that are listening on audio only. You can click the bios in our Instagram or Twitter accounts, and there'll be some links in there as well. Those are great resources for you as you continue to track your expenses, mileage, all sorts of things so that you're as prepared as you can be. Again, work with your tax professional on that. John, thanks for sharing your story and kind of opening up with us. We really appreciate that. I know you will be seeking retribution against Kyle for that last question.
I will, but I'm going to do it sneakily, and he won't see it coming.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. If there are things that you would like to praise us about, or suggestions, ideas for future segments, or feedback along those lines, we'd love to hear that from you. You can slide into our DMs on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Twitter and Instagram at check_complete, Facebook at checkcomplete podcast. You can also email us info@checkcompletepodcast.com. If there are things that you're not really thrilled about, maybe you could call those complaints. We'd be happy to hear those as well. Please write those onto the back of a PCL official U.S. Soccer men's blazer. That's numbered 1241 in the official sports website. It retails at $150. You can also find one in a slimming women's cut that you can write on and send to us. We'll get right back to you. John, thanks again. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Gordie.
We'll see you back for episode 13 very soon.
I said it's Denzel, Washington.